Hi, welcome back, or welcome if you are new. I am a young homeschooling mom to three. I have a kindergartner, a preschooler, and a toddler. And I'm also a homeschool graduate, and I have been loving getting to experience homeschooling from the teaching side of it. I love especially the research and the resources and just learning about raising my kids in a way that I want to. And teaching is just part of raising your kids in educating their mind and morals and character and all the things that we want our kids to have. I think homeschooling is just a piece of that puzzle. So that's what this channel is about. It's just about sharing my experiences, my research, my failures, everything homeschool related with you. And today we're going to be chatting in narration, not because I'm an expert on the subject or because I really even know what I'm doing or have had a lot of experience. None of those would really count for me. I did not grow up using narration when I was homeschooled, but I have been doing some delving into the subject because it's something that, well, now I really, really, really want to use. But before, I thought I just didn't understand the subject very well. I wanted to know a little more about it. It intrigued me. And so I kind of thought I would just share with you some of my thoughts and a resource that I have been using to learn more about narration. So let's just start with what is narration. If you're not familiar with the topic, narration is basically telling back, and it's your child telling back what they have learned. So we're all familiar. Well, a lot of us are familiar with the concept of if you can teach it, you know your subject well, right? Like if your child can teach what they've learned, then they know it. And I kind of feel like narration is really just kind of that in some ways. It's not quite because your child is not teaching you the subject matter, but if they're reiterating back to you what they have learned, and not anything specific. Narration is we read our history, we do our science, whatever, and they have to tell you what they've retained. They have to think through the process of what they've learned and what the key information is, what stood out to them, and they tell back to you. There's different levels of narration based on age and how long they've been doing it. They progress in the skill. There is oral narration or written narration, but you can really think of narration as telling back what they've learned. I don't even really use the word narration in our house because I don't care if they're narrating or telling back. It's all the same. So I really feel like adding that word is unnecessary, but you can do it how you want. So that's kind of what it is. It's the principle of you learn something and your child has to vocalize what they've learned. So they have to really think through not just kind of a fuzzy understanding of what they learned, but they really have to think through in a way to vocalize it coherently and in a orderly process. And it takes some work. One of the big resources that I have delved into recently, and I just finished reading this book with a friend, so that's kind of why this video now, because I just finished this and I feel like it's kind of fresh on my mind and I've been learning, is this book, Know and Tell: The Art of Narration by Karen Glass. Karen Glass, I believe, is one of the founders of Amazon Online. Don't quote me on that, I'm pretty sure. But she has a couple books. Um, and I really, really, really enjoyed this book. It really cemented a little bit more on the subject of narration for me and kind of the processes and the goals and what long term it would look like. I feel like I understand the topic a whole lot better. In fact, I guess you could say that this video is really a form of narration. I'm going sharing with you what I have learned, right? I'm vocalizing to you some of the things that I have learned. And in doing so, I really have to cement it in my own brain in order to be able to get it out to you. And it is true. She challenges in one of the early chapters in this book, she challenges you to stop and narrate out loud, not to anybody in particular, but out loud what you just read. It's hard. She challenges you to do it with some other books. I've done it with a couple chapters of a book, and I just read. Well, we'll start there. I've done it with a couple chapters of a book, and it was much more challenging and really did make me have to think. Like it really does. You have to understand what you read, not just read it and kind of understand it. Not a fuzzy idea, but if I want to be able to explain it to you, I really need to know what I'm saying. So it's hard. I have a book that I've finished reading once, and it was a really challenging read. So I'm going to be rereading it, and I'm going to narrate it into my phone and send it to a friend as a way of really, since I feel like I have a kind of a rough understanding of the book, I want to go through and really cement it in my brain and have to vocalize it and see if I understand what I'm reading or not. I think it's also just a good testing point of did I retain it? But I feel like I'm kind of rabbit trailing slightly. So narration starts, according to Karen Glass here, when the child is about 6 years old. It's a very Charlotte Mason method, but also classical. I feel like both classical and Charlotte Mason use it, but I feel like you hear it more in the Charlotte Mason world. Um, You're not supposed to. So I guess one thing I've heard of is in classical, sometimes they prompt the child with some classical curriculums, like the Well Trained Mind uses narration, but they have some prompts or some questions to kind of refresh the child on what you've read. Whereas Charlotte Mason is more traditional. Don't give them any prompts, don't give them any questions. You're not trying to process the information for them at all. This is purely their processing of the information. They will pull out what's important to them. They will remember the details that stuck out to them, not what stuck out to you or what you see as important, because what you connect with and really makes a point to you might be different to what your child connects with and might make a point to them. And I kind of like that previous view, the Charlotte Mason one, of not prompting or coaching your child, because I think it does require them to do more work and not just rely on your questions to help them remember or to reiterate what you think is important, what they think is important. I think it gives you a better idea of what your child retained and what stuck out to them. But essentially, you start when your child is 6 with oral narrations, and they start really short and really basic. And I think that that was something that this book was really helpful for me, was to see she has a lot of sample narrations, and it was really to see that when your child starts, it is not fluent, it is not pretty, it is not long, it is not glamorous. It's very basic, and often it starts when you first ask your child, "Tell me what you just read," they say the last sentence back to you, or they give you, like, a three-word sentence for the whole chunk you just read. And that was really helpful for me because 'cause I've just started trying this with my five-year-old, almost will be six-year-old this summer, and sometimes it's so true. She just says the last sentence, or she just says the last thought, or she just and so it was really helpful for me to be like, "Okay, this is normal." So I think some of her just understanding of like how to begin and realistic ideas and realistic approaches and what really does this look like, some examples of other kids' ideas was really helpful. And basically, you start with short snippets of material, and as the child progresses, it gets longer and longer till they can do like whole chapters or whole thoughts, depending on the material you're reading. If it's, an easy story to follow, they could narrate bigger chunks than if it's, an informational piece or something like that. Um, but the other thing that I found really helpful in this book is once they talk about kind of the purpose of narration and then how to start and oral narration, it goes into the written narration because I know with a lot of Charlotte Masoners, they really view narration as your key to writing, and they don't start writing until the child is quite a bit older. And I kind of was fuzzy in my mind as to what that would look like and if that was sufficient. Now, I'm still not sure that's how I'm going to do it, but after reading this book, I'm like, okay, there is a good plan in place and it makes sense. What they're saying does make sense. So she really walks you through when you would start writing, how you would start writing, and you really just start with the child instead of vocalizing their narrations, they start writing them down for you. You prompt them with different types of like instead of just what did you learn, you could ask more specific questions like talk about the characters, talk about you could ask things about without prompting or narrowing it too down um, about what you've read. And after reading her chapters on written narration and how it can develop into a fluent writer and a good writer, it does make sense to me. I'm not sure if I will solely stick with that or not. I'll kind of have to see. With each child, it may be different, and we're not even there, so I don't need to worry about it. But it was kind of reassuring that if I did decide to pursue this, it does seem like at least there's a solid structure in place. It's not just kind of, I don't know, when I hear like narrate until you write, I'm like, that seems so vague and not helpful. And will they really develop the skills they need? But seeing it like an actual plan and an actual method in place was really, really helpful for my brain. So I think if you're interested in narration, then I would highly recommend this book. It did a really good job at solidifying the purpose of narration, how to realistic expectations, narration turning it into writing. I feel like all of those things it really helped me with. And after reading this book, I am definitely more sold on narration than I was. Before it was like, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of interested in this idea." Now I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I want to use it." I really agree that having to think through something in order to re-express it really solidifies that learning in your mind, really helps you retain, helps you process, and hey, if we're gonna be doing school with our kids, I want them to retain and process, and it's a very simple device. It's also really good for their, elocution skills, their speaking, right? Like, they have to learn how to speak coherently, how to express themselves. Communication is big in this world, and she actually talks about that, how narration really plays out into your child's communication skills, because what is narration other than communicating thoughts to other people? And so learning how to communicate all the way up is a great skill for your child to have. So I am now a fan of narration, and I will be using it in our homeschool.